Hi, my name's Dr. Jane Roskams again. We're here at Brain Mind in New York City, and I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Heather Berlin, who gave a talk in a fascinating session this morning that dealt with matters of brain-computer interface, AI, what the future holds. And she's here with us today for us to maybe begin to unpack a few of the things that keep her up at night.
Sure.
And learn a little bit more about her journey that has led her here and where she might go with it next. So welcome,
Thank
Heather.
you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. I really enjoyed that session.
Thank you.
For the purposes of people who might not have sat there and listened this morning, I'm going to start off with what I hope is a softball. Mm-hmm. What is consciousness?
That's a really, well, I actually
Not
have
really
a
a
definition.
softball, but
I do have a definition of consciousness.
Yeah.
So I once actually went to this meeting in Aspen, and they brought together for like a week. It was like neuroscientists, psychologists, philosophers, and our whole mission was to have discussions and debates and come up with a definition of consciousness that we can all agree on, and with a whiteboard and everything. Finally, at the end of all of this, we all agree that it is first-person subjective experience.
Interesting.
So it's subjective only. I know my own consciousness. I assume you're conscious, but I have no access to it. Mm-hmm. And it's just simply that. You don't need language for it. You don't need intelligence. You don't need a sense of self. It's really just, feeling pain or, seeing the color red and pure experience.
Because it seems to be this singular term that gets hung out there when everybody's talking about AI and robots and things that are programmable that could represent the more we learn about the circuits of the human brain. Mm-hmm. But from what you just said, it goes way beyond that.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
That helps.
Good.
Because one of the things you talked about this morning, which it was the first time I'd heard it articulated this way, simulating intelligence is not equivalent to consciousness.
Yes. Yes.
So when you talk about simulating intelligence, obviously a lot of the talks we see at a conference like this are about using this recording technology or brain imaging technology to begin to inform how we process information and think. Mm-hmm. Where are we with respect to how accurately that is getting built into AI systems and the way that a complex machine that is being built processes the way we think and learn?
So, it's really interesting because the outcome looks sort of similar, right? And it's able to process all this information and come up with this output. But the way in which it does it is really different than the way the human brain does it. And in many ways, it can do it much more efficiently and effectively than we can. It can process much more information. If you think about, for example, a friend of mine was joking, like, why don't you just, instead of creating this lecture, just put it into ChatGPT and say, give me a lecture and I did it as an experiment to see, give me a lecture about where humans are in the age of AI. And it was able to just within seconds, pop out something. But it didn't have the same depth because it doesn't have experience. But the point is that I think to the common person, it looks as if, it's processing information the way the brain does because the output looks similar, but it's very different in terms of how it's actually getting there. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes a big difference. So that although it can pass, say, a Turing test and it can look as if it's conscious or very intelligent, it doesn't mean that it actually has consciousness or it has experience because it has different hardware. It didn't evolve over time the way that our brain did. And it's a simulation. It's not, so for example, if we built a neuromorphic computer that actually had parts that interact and connect, maybe that might have the potential to have consciousness, but a simulation, I don't think ever will.
So you just used a term that some of the people here understand and some of the people who watch this won't. Mm-hmm. How do you pass a Turing test? Oh,
so it's really easy. So Turing came up with this idea of that, as this used to be what the litmus test was for is something conscious or not, is a computer conscious or not, is if you can have a conversation with it and you can't tell whether it's a human or a computer model. And the idea was that once this system could pass the Turing test, I would mistake it for actually I'm talking to a person, that it would be conscious. But we now don't think that that is the definition of consciousness, because they can basically pass the Turing test. They can answer questions, and I can respond to, say, an AI system, and they can some be fooled and think it's actually a real person. Let's say we're texting, they can act like they're real. So, but that doesn't mean it's conscious.
I would imagine Alexa would be really good at the Turing test.
Yeah. ChatGPT is really good at the Turing test. So all these sort of language, natural language processing, they can really fool us. And now they're doing things where they can take, let's say, all of the texts I've ever written and all of the responses I've ever given and mimic me to somebody else, right? So, and you think about the uses of this when somebody dies.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can have all that information and say, I want them to text me back in the voice of my, grandma. And it can really come up with responses that sound very similar to her. And in your mind, you start to think, could this be sort of like having a conversation with my grandmother, let's say?
No, it's enormous promise, but also scary.
A little.
Right?
Yeah.
The whole, how far could this be taken piece. Just shifting gears slightly, because beyond being involved in the research world, you're also a practicing clinical psychologist.
Yes.
And with a focus on OCD, anxiety. Was there something that led you into that particular area, somewhere along the line, that just grabbed you and made you want to be somebody that would make a difference there?
Yeah, for 2 decades, I just was doing basic research, clinical research, trying to understand the neural basis of impulsive and compulsive disorders so that we can come up with more novel treatments. I was involved in some DBS study, deep brain stimulation for OCD, novel sort of pharmacological studies. And I was really fascinated, in particular with the prefrontal cortex, because it's the most recently evolved. Humans have the largest percentage of prefrontal cortex compared to the rest of the brain than any other animal. And I really think it's the seat of who we are, of our sense of self. And our ability to have self-control is the thing that allows us to build democracies. And we're not just running on basic, basal, animalistic desires. And so I got fascinated with this part of the brain and understanding it. But over the years, you do all this work, you write these research papers, but I wasn't able to see the real-time impact in people.
Absolutely.
And I said, I really want to take all this information and actually just really help people in real time. And so I did a re-specialization to get my clinical license, mid-career, basically, to be able to use all the sort of knowledge that we have from basic neuroscience and research in psychiatry and apply this to individuals, along with the classic, CB, cognitive behavioral therapy. And for me, it's really gratifying to be able to see change in real time. It's not just theoretical, but you're really helping. And it's almost like it's selfish in a way, because it's very gratifying for me when I feel like I can help somebody. And so I really found I enjoy the clinical work a lot. I mean, I need both. Like, I need to be able to think theoretically and think about these big ideas, but also have it grounded in reality, in actually real people in real lives.
Wonderful.
And it informs the research too, because if you're only sitting in Ivy Tower, you don't, see the real world problems. Yeah.
So, as the mother of a teen with ADHD, I've had who's a neuroscientist who knows everything, doesn't know everything. I've had a huge learning curve about executive function, impulse control, and the prefrontal cortex over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
It has absolutely opened my eyes as to what you just highlighted. How little of what my field knows gets in the hands of parents, pediatricians, even specialists, who might go to conferences but really are not attuned to how we extract the findings that are important for kids that fit this category versus this category. Definitely for kids who fit into different ethnic background and identities, or now, gender choices. They end up in this convoluted definition matrix of who they are as teens. We're at a really fractious time right now for realizing that we can put all the money in the world into research, but if it isn't helping kids from disappearing down the school to prison pipeline or slipping through the cracks in school, then we're not doing our job properly. So one thing that I think is wonderful about you is that you have stepped out of the ivory tower and out of your office and into the public arena to be more involved in getting the messaging out. When did that start? And what led to it?
That's a good question. So the idea of, getting out of the lab and having impact, it was both to have an impact on individual lives, but to educate people about, like, look what we're finding in the labs, and this is useful for you in your life, and how you can apply it. I didn't seek it out. I started doing a lot of public talks about my research and things, and it actually started because these talent scouts at the Discovery Channel reached out to me once, and they said, we're going to shoot this show. We want to fly you to London to audition.
Awesome.
And I was like, free trip to London,
Sign me
great.
up.
Yeah, and I had gone to school in the UK. I had a lot of friends there, so I went and I got the job. And before I knew it, they said, okay, you're gonna go on the road for 6 weeks. And I was like, well, I can't do that. Like, I have an academic position at a medical school.
Life.
Yeah. And they said, just trust me, whatever you can, you'll not regret this.
Wonderful.
So I went to my chair. I got a leave of absence. I went on the road. We went around the world for this particular show and met people who had these extraordinary abilities. We were trying to understand scientifically how they can do the things they can do. It went well beyond what we thought was humanly possible, and it was sort of the power of the mind over matter.
Yeah.
But that was my first sort of foray into that world. And then once I did that, it was kind of a snowball effect. And I was so fortunate to have, I became friends with Bill Nye, the science guy. He's a huge science communicator.
From Seattle.
Yes, he is from Seattle, exactly. And then he introduced me to Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's another amazing science communicator. And they kind of were my mentors and took me under their wing, and that began that journey. And I do a lot of work now with the National Academy of Sciences. There's something called the Science and Entertainment Exchange, where we try to get science into mainstream media, like in sort of secret ways, like into X-Men and whatever, to get people, find people not who are already interested in science, but sort of meet people where they're at and bring science to them. So I've been involved with some of those projects as well.
That's awesome.
I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I just hosted a Nova series on the brain, and that was a real work of love, because that was based on like a lot of my research that I'd done on consciousness. So it was like these two worlds came together, and it was really a wonderful experience.
Now, is that shown?
Yeah, that just came out in, where are we now? This came out last year.
Got it.
And now it's online.
All right,
so it's Your Brain.
I will be checking
Nova.
that out.
Yeah.
I do find myself I spend a lot of time in my community answering questions of things that people, they don't tend to ask me what consciousness is, thank goodness, because that is not my area. But I find myself pointing them in the direction of where they can go find those answers. So I will add that to my list of things that they need to go see. So in that vein, the first time I heard your name was not this weekend.
No?
Nor was it the Discovery Channel. One of my best friends is a prof at the University of Edinburgh. And several years ago, she sends me an email, says, do you know this Heather Berlin? She's at the Edinburgh Festival. I'm like, what? Why would I know it? She's a neuroscientist, Jane. And she's giving a presentation on impulse control.
Yes.
Which was not a presentation, apparently comedy.
Yes.
Okay, how did impulse control become comedy, and how did you end up at the Edinburgh Festival, which is one of the best places in the world to be for entertainment?
So fun. So I was fortunate enough to perform 2 different shows at 2 different years at the, actually 3 different years at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And I got involved in that because my partner at the time, he is a performer, he's a science rapper, Baba Brinkman, and he would perform there many years and sort of came up along with Lin-Manuel Miranda, who did Hamilton, and so sort of science rap. And he said, like, why don't we do a show together? So we rewrote this show together, where the first show was actually about improvisation, the neural basis of improvisation and creativity. It was called Off the Top, and he would do freestyle rap, and I would talk about what's happening in his brain.
Wow.
So it was like a science comedy show. And that evolved into the second show, which was on impulse control in the brain.
Got it.
And it was just such a wonderful experience. I mean, every day we performed every day, and it was like a packed house. And I learned about comedy. I can't try to be funny. But my partner said at the time, he said, you actually are funny if you just allow yourself to say what you're thinking. So like I just sort of opened up the floodgates. I learned how to like let go of control. And usually giving an academic talk, you're very careful and precise about everything you say. And this was like, you can just say whatever comes in your mind. And it was liberating. It was a wonderful experience. And so who was your friend at University of Edinburgh?
Margaret Heck, she was a geneticist.
Oh, I don't even know.
You would not know her. But she's also very into the arts in all its various forms, and yeah, she emailed me about this, and I'm like, wow, wish I could go see that. And I'm sure I could learn a thing or two.
We actually performed it off Broadway as well, so it became an off-Broadway show. We performed it at the Soho Playhouse here in New York, and did it at the 92nd Street Y. So it had a nice like longevity to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So finishing up. Where are you with respect to what's next for, because you're highlighting the desperate need we have for getting authentic, reproducible, reliable evidence about what the brain is and isn't doing in different mental states and different emotional states in the hands of people who are desperate for the information and who could learn it to help others.
Yes.
So what's next?
So a couple of things. I'm almost done. I'm sort of 3/4 of the way there. I'm writing my first book. It's going to come out with Simon & Schuster. The title isn't going to be revealed yet, but it's about impulse control on the brain.
Brilliant.
So it's meant for the general public, and things like ADHD and how to deal with impulse control issues, but also when is it therapeutic to let go, and letting go in a controlled way is actually really healthy as well. So that hopefully by the end of next year will be coming out. I'm working on. We're just finishing up shooting the first series of a podcast with Christoph Koch, who was the head of the Paul Allen Brain Institute. We're co-hosting it. It's called Perception Box, and how we all see the world through different perception boxes. And we're a series of interviews with amazing scientists and philosophers. We just interviewed a couple of people who are here at this meeting, basically. And I'm also working on a project. It's a project looking at music's impact on the brain, and how we can use music strategically to improve our focus, our attention, to relax. And that project is it's called Reverberation, with a group that includes Peter Gabriel, which is amazing to get to work with him and his daughter, Anna. So those are a couple of the projects that are sort of in the works now. And then another TV show about the effects of fame on the brain. Wow. So it's a lot of things
busy.
to stir at once, but they all sort of come out at different times, and you just switch gears. But the goal is really to just get people excited about neuroscience and the brain, and realize that they can use this knowledge in their everyday lives to improve, either help with psychological disorders, but also just to improve the quality of life in general.
Where do you see the efforts that are being made by Brain Mind to create a whole different way of interaction, working with respect to what you want to see happen in the world?
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoy coming. So the last Brain Mind I was at was actually in 2019 at Stanford, and I actually helped organize a day all on consciousness.
I remember that.
Do you remember
and
that?
There was a rapper that performed that.
That's correct. I brought in the rapper. That was me. Exactly. So I helped actually organize that. And the Consciousness Day in particular, and gave a talk there as well. So and I love working with Diana and Michael, and they're just. It's a great vision, to bring together people from industry and VC and tech and neuroscience, and to really help create things that actually can, be in the real world, right? So we're talking about science, but we do need money. We need funding to get things going, to get new ideas, out there. So I think it's a really great environment to get that done. And most of the great stuff that happens in these meetings, I mean, it's not just the talks, but it's really the way we can all interact with each other. Right. They leave so much time for and space for those interactions. And then there's like demonstrations and, hands-on things. And so it's just a really, really great space and community of people.
Well, thank you very much for coming and being part of it.
Thank you.